Howdy, Immortalium here, and recently I was perusing my comments section, in particular on a video called One Volume Manga Recommendations, and I saw this great comment from a Muhammad Omara, which was basically saying that I should do a recommendations video of manga series between 5 to 15 volumes. And even though he describes it as short series, and I would debate that a 15-volume series I would not consider to be short, but nonetheless it was a fantastic video idea, and I decided that I would give him a shout out and to do the video that he recommended. So thank you again, Muhammad Omara, it's a fantastic video idea. The other thing that I wanted to clarify is that in contrast to my one volume manga recommendations video, in which I was focusing on manga released in English that you can get in one volume, here I'm actually going to be focusing on how many volumes released originally in Japanese, and then I will explain how many volumes that is to collect in English. In addition, I also want to point out that I'll be trying to focus on relatively obscure series. Many of these series I've talked about in the past before, but for instance, just to give an example, one of my favorite manga of all time is Death Note, and Death Note is about 12 volumes. And that would definitely fit into this category, but considering how famous Death Note is, pretty much everyone's heard of Death Note, I decided that I might as well leave that out and instead try to recommend manga that maybe you haven't heard of. Maybe you've missed a couple of these titles and you're thinking to yourself, that sounds interesting, maybe I should go check out that manga series. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first manga series that I want to talk about is Limit. Now, Limit is a very interesting manga. It's a shoujo manga, but it's probably one of the more atypical shoujo manga series that I've ever read. So the story follows a character called Mizuki Kano. And Mizuki Kano is a very popular girl at her high school. She hangs out with all the kind of cool girls, and she seems to be living a pretty good life. But one day on a class trip, while they're on the bus actually tumbles into a ravine. And most of her class is killed. There's a few other girls that survived this bus crash, and now they have to survive in this environment while they're waiting for help. And there's a lot of drama here, particularly from one girl who didn't particularly like this popular clique that Mizuki Kano was hanging out with. So there's a lot of threat of violence, there's a lot of drama, a lot of conflict. And a lot of people actually compared the series to Lord of the Flies, which is actually a perfect example to compare it to. And a lot of the backgrounds and a lot of the motivations of these characters, when they're revealed, are quite fascinating. There's some very strong character development here, particularly from the lead girl, Mizuki Kano. And overall, it's a really interesting read. Admittedly, it's not flawless. There was some character development that I wasn't particularly keen on. And the ending, there was a particular aspect of the ending that I wasn't particularly fond of. But beyond that, it was still a very interesting read. And I also have to say that I really like the artwork here. They've got very pleasant character designs, there's a lot of good detail, and I have to say the panel work here is superb as well. It's a really nice looking manga. So in total, I would definitely recommend Limit. Now, Limit is available in 6 volumes from Vertical. I do not know if it's still currently available to pick up, but if you get the chance, I would definitely recommend that you pick up this series. I think it's a very interesting read. After that, we have a series called Samurai Executioner. Now, if you're familiar with Lone Wolf and Cub, you'll be happy to know that Samurai Executioner is actually created by the same two people. Kazuo Koike did the story and Goseki Kojima has done the artwork. And Samurai Executioner is actually a very good partner series for Lone Wolf and Cub. Basically, we follow a character called Yamada Asaemon, and Yamada Asaemon becomes the head sword tester for the Shogun, which basically means he's the head executioner. And there's a lot of fascinating stories here. This is a very episodic series, and basically we quite often follow these characters who are going to be executed. We learn why they're going to be executed, their motivations for their execution, whether there's any kind of last things that they have to do before they're executed. And a lot of these stories are really fascinating. Admittedly, not every single one. There's a couple in there that aren't as great as I was hoping they would be. But nonetheless, I found Samurai Executioner to be an excellent and fascinating read. Very much a period piece. And of course, I have to talk about the artwork here. Now, the artwork here is incredibly similar to Lone Wolf and Cub. It's got a kind of a semi-realistic look a lot of detail, particularly in the backgrounds, but it's also stylized and actually reminds me a lot of very classical Japanese artwork. Now, this series is available from Dark Horse. Originally, I believe it was about 10 volumes in Japan, but Dark Horse has released this in a 4-volume omnibus release. As you can see, these are some very thick omnibuses. The thing that might grate some people is that this is presented in left to right, so the artwork is flopped. And while I personally had no problem reading it this way, I do know that there are a bunch of people out there who have a problem with flopped manga. And if you have a problem with flopped manga, then it's unfortunate that you can't read this series, because this series is legitimately really good. Now, the next series that I want to talk about is a personal favorite of mine, and that is Girlfriends. Now, I did a review of this series recently, but I'll quickly summarize. So there is a high school girl called Mariko, who's quite often simply referred to as Mari. And she is very intelligent, she does incredibly well in her exams, but she's quite shy and a bit of a loner. And one day, a girl, a very popular high school girl called Akiko, presents herself to her and says that she's going to be friends with her. And understandably, Mari is a little taken aback, she's a little unsure of this, but as they develop their friendship, they really come to admire each other. And Mari starts to have a lot of fun with her. She is introduced to makeup, she's introduced to a lot of fashionable clothing. She really likes her friendship with Akiko. But eventually, she starts to realize, hang on, I'm starting to develop feelings for this girl. Feelings that aren't simply friendship, but romantic in interest. And she's very confused, she's very unsure of herself how to respond to that. And that's how the story progresses. So this is in fact a Yuri manga. This is a manga that focuses on romance between two girls. But one of the things that I love about this manga, that this relationship isn't overly romanticized. Mari has no idea how to handle a same-sex relationship. She hasn't been educated about it, she doesn't know how to handle it, and she actually kind of begins to push Akiko away in her confusion. As you can imagine, Akiko is quite devastated by this. And this very realistic depiction of their relationship is absolutely fantastic. In addition, there's a whole cast of very likable characters here, and the art style is very shoujo-esque, even though this was published in a seinen magazine. And there's a lot of nice details here, the characters are very pleasantly designed, it's got a lot of very flowery artwork. It's a very pleasant, enjoyable series, and definitely I would recommend this not only as one of the best Yuri manga that I've ever read, but as one of the best romance manga I've ever read. I think it's that good. It's legitimately a fantastic manga series, and I think if you're a manga fan and you're into romance and you're into Yuri, if you're into good storytelling, I think you owe it to yourself to pick up Girlfriends. Now, admittedly, the ending isn't quite as good as I would have liked it to be. It feels a bit rushed, but it's still an amazing series. Now, with regards to how many volumes there are to collect, so this series was originally released in 5 volumes in Japan, but for its Western release, 7 Seas decided to release this in 2.5 volume omnibuses. So this barely scrapes into the criteria for this video, but still it's a very easy series to collect. You only need to collect 2 volumes in English, and most people that I've recommended this to and have followed through on picking this series up have come to love it just as much as I have. So I think this is a great series to pick up. After that, we have a fantastic series called Buddha from Osamu Tezuka. And as you might expect from the title, this manga series is a biography of Siddhartha Gautama, as in the founder of Buddhism. And admittedly, some people are put off by that. A lot of people are kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to read a manga series about religion. But the story of Siddhartha Gautama is absolutely fascinating. How he was this prince, how he had everything that he could have wanted, but he saw the suffering that was happening in the world, and he decided that he would go out there and do something about it. He tried to find the way to live, the way to achieve nirvana, to be able to help people with their suffering. And because of that, it's a really important story. I think Osamu Tezuka does a fantastic job here, although there are a lot of fourth wall breaks, a lot of very funny gags. Maybe some people who are unfamiliar with Osamu Tezuka might be a bit taken aback by those, but he never wants his stories to get too serious, you see. So it's an absolutely fantastic read, highly recommend Buddha. The artwork here is exceptional. This is Osamu Tezuka doing his art at the height of his prime. And I think it's an absolutely beautiful looking series. Now, with regards to its original release, this series was released in 15 volumes in Japan. So in almost the complete opposite of Girlfriends, in the sense that it barely scraped in to this criteria from the other side. But in English, it was released in 8 volumes. And interestingly, there's a bit of variety in how you can pick up this series. So Vertical originally released this series. They released it in a hardcover series, and then they later released it in a paperback series. But HarperCollins, which I believe is a British distributor of books, got the rights to do a release of Buddha in the UK and Ireland. And admittedly, the HarperCollins editions of Buddha aren't the greatest in the world in terms of their paper quality. If you can, I'd recommend you to go get the Vertical editions, but as someone who does own the HarperCollins editions, they serve me quite well. And they're definitely a legitimate way to enjoy this story. However, I do also have to clarify that just like Samurai Executioner, this series is flopped. So the artwork is read from left to right in contrast to the normal right to left of manga. Again, some people will be upset by that. Some people will not want to read the series because of that. That is perfectly legitimate. I completely understand why you do that. But I would also say that this series is an absolutely fantastic read that you need to go read. Even if you do have a bit of an issue with flopping, I think you will still read the series, you'll become entranced by it, you'll enjoy it. I think it's just that good. Now for one of my favorite shoujo manga series of all time. It's a series called A Devil and Her Love Song. Now, A Devil and Her Love Song is about a girl called Maria Kawai. And she's a very beautiful looking high school girl, but she has no tact. She is quite aggressive, very much pointing things out with absolutely no subtlety, and has garnered her a bad reputation. But she's not a terrible person, and a perfect example of this actually at the beginning of this story, where she is on a train and she kicks the sleeping guy. But the reason that she kicked the sleeping guy was because this older lady beside him was going to pickpocket him. And so by waking him up, she's actually preventing him from getting pickpocketed. But she doesn't inform anyone of that. She doesn't inform the sleeping man of that. The only person she actually confronts on this is the pickpocketer. These other girls who are on the train see this, they think that she's a terrible person. And it certainly doesn't help that her classmates learn that she was expelled from her previous school because of violence against the teacher. But there are a few characters here who actually do try to become friends with Maria. And as they learn more about her, they learn more about her personality, learn more about her history, a lot of the reasons for her tactlessness. And overall, I think this is an absolutely incredible story. And one that I don't really hear too many people talk about, and I think that's a shame because this is definitely one of the best shoujo manga that I've ever read. Interestingly, it's worth noting that there's actually going to be a live-action TV drama series of this in Japan soon. So maybe some people will pay more attention to this series once that's released, I don't know. I also have to say here that the artwork here is absolutely fantastic. Admittedly, it has a very typical shoujo-esque look, but there's a lot of great details here, a lot of great character designs, a lot of fantastic paneling. I think this is a superb series, and definitely one of my favorite shoujo manga of all time. I would definitely recommend that you go pick it up if you can. It is 13 volumes long. That figure is shared by both the Japanese release and the English release. So it is a bit of a commitment to pick up, but nonetheless, I highly recommend this series. I think it's fantastic. And finally, I think if you are a long-time viewer of this channel, I think you have a bit of suspicion of what manga is going to end off this 5 to 15 manga recommendation video. It's my favorite manga of all time. It is With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child. Now, just to give a bit of background here, a bit of an explanation. So this manga series is very important to me, and the reason that it's very important to me, beyond it being an incredible read, is the fact that I myself am autistic. I have Asperger's syndrome, and there's a lot of situations in this manga series that I can very much relate to. But still, nonetheless, I've heard that even people who don't have autism find this series absolutely fantastic, absolutely enjoyable. The story follows a character called Sachiko Azuma, and Sachiko Azuma has just had her first child. And this first child, she and her husband call Hikaru, which means light in Japanese, and it's meant to represent the fact that he's the light of their life, which is absolutely beautiful. But as he grows older, she starts to realize that he's not like other babies. He acts differently, he has different responses. There is something different about him. And she later finds out that he is autistic. And again, she doesn't understand this word. One thing that's actually quite fascinating here is that in Japanese, autism is written in kanji with the characters for self-closing syndrome. So there's a big misunderstanding in Japanese of what autism is. And so there's a lot of confusion in her life about it. She has a lot of struggle at the beginning of the story as she's trying to figure out how to raise this child, as this child is upsetting everyone around her. But as she comes to understand what autism is, she actually makes it an effort to help try to educate people around her in her life, to make them understand why Hikaru acts this way, and to increase understanding of autism in Japanese society. And it's a incredibly beautiful story. Admittedly, the first chapter can be a bit tough because there's a lot of people who are thinking that she's a bad mother because of the way her child acts, and that can be quite a tough first read. But as you continue onwards with the story, you come to see how much struggle there is in their lives, but how they can overcome it, how they can help improve society, how they can increase the understanding of society towards autistic people. And as you might imagine, that speaks very closely to me. It also actually makes me really appreciate how much my parents did for me, seeing the struggle that these parents have to go through in raising Hikaru. Now, there's a few things to say about this. First of all, the artwork here is beautiful. This is a josei manga, so this manga is targeted towards adult women. Yeah, and you can kind of see that it has a bit of a shoujo aesthetic, but it's more realistic, it's more detailed. And the artwork here is exceptional. I think it's one of the most beautiful looking manga that I've ever read. But it's important to note how this series ended, because it's quite tragic actually. Keiko Tobe, the author for this series, actually got ill near the end of this manga series, and she actually passed away before she was able to fully complete this series. However, in the last volume of this series, they have her storyboards that she was developing while she was in hospital to be able to do the concluding chapters to this series. And even though she was never able to fill them in, she was never able to complete the artwork for these storyboards, it's still amazing that these storyboards were ultimately released so that we could see a conclusion to the story. Admittedly, the conclusion feels a little rushed, but that's perfectly understandable. And I can't thank Keiko Tobe enough for creating this series. I think this is such an important series. It's the greatest manga that I've personally ever read, and I would highly recommend that people who are able to pick this series up do so. Originally, the series was released in 15 volumes in Japan, but Yen Press released this series in 8 volumes. Admittedly, I struggled for a while to be able to complete this series, as it seemed like the series was out of print, and I don't know how easy it is to be able to pick it up these days, but I would definitely recommend that if you can, if you're capable, just start picking this series up. You will absolutely love it, I'm sure of it. So that was my recommendations for manga series between 5 to 15 volumes long. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you came across manga series that you're unfamiliar with. I would love to be able to hear your thoughts on some of your favorite 5 to 15 volume manga series. Have you read any of these series before? Do you like any of these series? Do you dislike any of these series? And of course, if you have any other thoughts or comments that you want to make on this topic, on these series, etc., leave all that in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I recommend that you use my Amazon affiliate links in the description below, both for Amazon UK and for AmazonAmerica.com. By buying anime and manga through those affiliate links, not only are you supporting me, not only are you supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the anime and manga industries that you're buying from. So if you're interested in any of these series, I would definitely recommend that you purchase them through my Amazon affiliate link to be able to support the channel and to be able to support the manga industries. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.